The White Death, the deadliest sniper in history. In the winter of 1939, Soviet soldiers started vanishing in the snow. No sound, no warning, just gone. One by one they dropped dead and nobody knew where the shots were coming from. The Soviets sent their best snipers to find him. They failed. They sent bombers. He survived. They even shot him in the face with an explosive bullet. And he still lived. This is the story of Simo Häyhä, the man they called the White Death. The sniper who killed over 500 men in 100 days. And he did it all without a scope. December 1939, Finland. The temperature is -40 degrees. Your breath freezes in the air. Your fingers go numb after seconds. And somewhere out there in the endless white forest, death is waiting. Not from the cold, not from hunger, but from a single man with a rifle. A man so deadly that entire battalions refused to move forward. A man who turned the snow into his weapon and the silence into his ally. His real name was Simo Häyhä, but the Soviets had another name for him. They called him Belaya Smrt, the White Death, and this is his story. To understand how one man became the most feared sniper in history, we need to go back to November 30th, 1939. That's when the Soviet Union invaded Finland. And on paper, this wasn't even supposed to be a war. It was supposed to be a slaughter. The Soviet Union had over 160,000 soldiers ready to invade, thousands of tanks, hundreds of aircraft, modern weapons, a massive, well-equipped army that had crushed enemies before. Finland had about 32,000 soldiers. Most of them were farmers and workers who had been called up to fight. They didn't have enough rifles. They didn't have enough ammunition. They definitely didn't have enough tanks or planes. The world expected Finland to surrender in weeks, maybe days. Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, thought this would be easy. He wanted to take Finnish territory to protect Leningrad, which is now called St. Petersburg. Finland refused to give up their land, so Stalin decided to just take it by force. He believed his army would roll through Finland like a knife through butter. But Stalin made one critical mistake. He underestimated the Finns. And he had no idea that waiting in those frozen forests was a quiet farmer who would become his army's worst nightmare. Who was Simo Häyhä? Before the war, Simo Häyhä was nobody special. At least that's what most people thought. He was born in 1905 in a small farming town in southern Finland called Rotjärvi. His family were farmers, simple people. They grew crops, raised animals, lived off the land. Simo was short, really short. He stood just 5 feet tall, about 160 centimeters. In any other context, nobody would look twice at him. He was quiet, kept to himself, didn't talk much. But Simo had a skill he'd been developing since he was a teenager. He could shoot. And I don't mean he was just good at shooting. I mean he could hit a target better than almost anyone alive. See, in Finland, hunting wasn't just a hobby, it was survival. During the long, brutal winters, families needed meat. And if you couldn't shoot straight, you didn't eat. Simo started hunting as a kid. He'd take his rifle into the forest and track animals for hours, rabbits, birds, deer, whatever he could find, and over time he became obsessed with accuracy. He practiced constantly, every single day. He joined a local shooting club and entered competitions. He won awards, lots of them. People in his town knew he was a great shot, but that was about it. He wasn't famous. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a farmer who happened to be really, really good with a rifle. Then in 1925, he was drafted into the Finnish army for mandatory military service. Every Finnish man had to serve, so this wasn't unusual. Simo did his 1 year of service and went back to farming. But during that year, something important happened. The military saw his shooting skills and trained him as a sharpshooter. They taught him discipline, tactics, how to stay calm under pressure. After his service ended, he went home and continued his quiet life. He worked on the farm, he hunted. He competed in shooting competitions on the weekends. Life was simple, peaceful. But then in 1939, everything changed. The Soviet Union invaded, and Finland called up every man who'd ever served in the military. Simo Häyhä, the short, quiet farmer was handed a rifle and told to report for duty. He was 33 years old, and he was about to become the deadliest sniper in human history. The Winter War begins. When the Soviets invaded, they expected an easy victory. Their plan was simple: march into Finland with overwhelming force, crush any resistance, take the territory they wanted. Done. But the Soviets didn't understand Finland. They didn't understand the terrain, and they definitely didn't understand the Finnish people. Finland is covered in thick forests and frozen lakes. In winter, the temperature drops to -30, -40 degrees, sometimes colder. The landscape is brutal, unforgiving. If you're not prepared, the cold alone will kill you. And the Soviet soldiers, most of them came from warmer parts of the Soviet Union. They weren't ready for this kind of cold. Their uniforms weren't warm enough. Their equipment froze. Their tanks got stuck in the snow. Meanwhile, the Finns knew this land like the back of their hand. They'd grown up here. They knew how to move through the snow without making a sound. They knew how to survive in the cold. They knew which paths to take and which areas to avoid, and they used this knowledge to their advantage. The Finnish strategy was simple but effective. They couldn't win a head-on fight against the massive Soviet army. They didn't have the numbers or the equipment. So instead, they used guerrilla tactics. Small groups of soldiers would hide in the forest, wait for Soviet columns to pass by, then attack from the sides. They'd strike fast, cause chaos, then disappear into the trees before the Soviets could fight back. The Soviets called these tactics ghost attacks because they never saw the Finns coming. And right in the middle of all this chaos was Simo Häyhä. He was assigned to the 6th Company of the 34th Infantry Regiment. His unit was tasked with defending a specific area near the Kala River. This was a critical position. If the Soviets broke through here, they could push deeper into Finland. Simo's job was simple: stop them, and that's exactly what he did, but not in the way anyone expected. Simo didn't fight like a regular soldier. He fought alone. He'd wake up before dawn, dress in all-white winter camouflage, grab his rifle, and head out into the snow. He'd find a good spot, somewhere with a clear view of Soviet positions but also good cover, somewhere he could hide. Then he'd wait, for hours, completely still, barely breathing, waiting for a target. The rifle he used was a Finnish M2830. It was a simple rifle, nothing fancy. No high-tech modifications. And here's the interesting part: Simo didn't use a scope. Most snipers use scopes because they make distant targets easier to see, but Simo refused. Why? A few reasons. First, scopes can fog up in extreme cold. And remember, it's -40 degrees out there. A fogged-up scope is useless. Second, scopes add height to the rifle. That means you have to raise your head higher to look through it. Higher head equals easier target. Simo wanted to stay as low as possible. Third, scopes can reflect sunlight. Even a tiny glint of light reflecting off the glass can give away your position. Simo didn't want to take that risk, so he used iron sights, just the basic sights that come with the rifle, and he was deadly accurate with them. The first time Simo went out, he killed 4 Soviet soldiers in one day. 4 confirmed kills, not bad for a farmer, but Simo was just getting started. The next day he killed 6, then 8, then 12. The numbers kept climbing. Every single day, Soviet soldiers were dying and they had no idea where the shots were coming from. See, Simo had a method, a very specific way of doing things that made him almost impossible to detect. First, he always positioned himself with the sun behind him. That way, if there was any glint from his rifle, it wouldn't be visible to the enemy. Second, he kept his body as low as possible. He'd dig a small pit in the snow and lie flat. Sometimes he'd lie there for 8 hours without moving. Third, and this is clever, he'd pack snow in front of his face. When you shoot a rifle, the muzzle blast kicks up snow and dirt. That's a telltale sign of a sniper's position. But Simo would pack the snow down tight so that when he fired, there was no visible puff of snow. No sign he was there. Fourth, he'd put snow in his mouth before shooting. Why? Because your breath creates steam in cold air. If someone's watching carefully, they might spot that little cloud of steam and figure out where you are. Snow in the mouth keeps your breath cold. No steam, no detection. These weren't things he learned in the military. These were things he figured out on his own through trial and error, through pure instinct. And they worked. By the second week of the war, Soviet soldiers were terrified. They started calling him the White Death because he seemed to appear out of nowhere, kill without warning, then vanish like a ghost. Entire units refused to move forward because they knew the White Death was out there somewhere, watching, waiting. The Soviets tried everything to find him. They sent out their own snipers, counter-snipers specifically trained to hunt enemy snipers. Simo killed them, all of them. One by one, the best Soviet snipers went into the forest to find the White Death, and none of them came back. There's a story about one Soviet sniper who was considered one of the best in the Red Army. They sent him specifically to kill Simo. This guy was experienced, well-trained, had killed many men before. He was confident he'd succeed where others had failed. He went into the forest. He never came back. Simo found him first. One shot, dead. The Soviets were running out of options, so they tried something else. Artillery. They started firing artillery shells at areas where they thought Simo might be hiding, just blindly shelling the forest, hopping to get lucky. Simo heard the shells coming and moved. He was always moving, never stayed in the same spot too long. The artillery killed trees and snow, not Simo. Then they tried bombing runs. They sent planes to drop bombs on the forest, carpet bombing entire sections where Finnish soldiers were known to operate. The bombs shook the ground, set trees on fire, created massive craters. Simo dug deeper into the snow and waited for it to stop. When the bombs stopped falling, he went back to work. More Soviet soldiers died. At this point, the Soviets were desperate. They knew one man was causing massive problems for their entire operation. It wasn't just the kills. It was the fear. Soldiers were panicking. Morale was collapsing. Nobody wanted to be the next victim of the White Death. Some Soviet soldiers started refusing orders. They didn't want to patrol in areas where he might be. Officers had to threaten their own men just to get them to move forward. By January 1940, Simo Häyhä had killed over 200 Soviet soldiers. 200 confirmed kills in just over a month. And that's just the ones that were officially recorded. The real number was probably higher, much higher. See, in war, confirming a kill isn't always easy. You need a witness or physical evidence, but Simo was working alone most of the time, deep in the forest, far from other soldiers, so there were probably many kills that were never officially counted. Some historians believe his actual kill count was closer to 700 or 800. But even if we stick with the official number, over 500 confirmed kills, it's still the highest sniper kill count in any war ever recorded. And here's what makes it even more insane. He did all of this in less than 100 days. Most of those kills happened during the Winter War, which lasted from November 30th, 1939 to March 13th, 1940. That's only 105 days. So on average, Simo was killing about 5 Soviet soldiers every single day. 5 per day, for over 3 months, without a scope. In negative 40-degree weather. Think about what that means. Every single day, Simo would wake up, go out into the freezing cold, find a position, wait for hours, kill 5 or more men, then return to base. Day after day, week after week. No breaks, no days off, just constant methodical killing. And it wasn't just rifle kills. Simo also used a Suomi KP-31 submachine gun during close-range encounters. When Soviet soldiers got too close to Finnish positions, Simo would switch to the submachine gun and engage in direct combat. He's credited with killing over 200 additional soldiers with the submachine gun. So in total, combining both rifle and submachine gun kills, Simo Häyhä killed over 500 men in 100 days. 500 human beings. That's more than the entire population of some small towns. And every single one of those kills was deliberate, calculated, precise. But here's what's really interesting. Simo never bragged about it. He never celebrated his kills. He never seemed proud of the fact that he was killing so many people. When people asked him about it years later, he'd shrug and say something simple like, "I did what I was told to do." He saw it as his duty, his job, nothing more. There was no glory in it for him, no excitement, just work. Grim, necessary work. He was defending his country, that's all that mattered to him. This wasn't about being a hero or becoming famous. It was about survival, Finland's survival, and Simo was willing to do whatever it took to protect his homeland. By February 1940, the Soviet command was losing their minds. They had over 100,000 soldiers in Finland and they were being held back by a Finnish army that was 10 times smaller. And a big part of that problem was Simo Häyhä. He'd become a symbol, a legend. Finnish soldiers were inspired by him. They knew that if one man could cause that much damage, then maybe they could win this war. Soviet soldiers, on the other hand, were terrified. The White Death had become a ghost story, a nightmare. Some soldiers claimed he could see in the dark. Others said he could shoot around corners. Obviously, none of that was true, but fear makes people believe crazy things. The Soviets decided they needed to kill Simo no matter what it cost. They assigned entire squads specifically to hunt him down. They offered rewards to anyone who could kill him. They studied his patterns, trying to predict where he'd strike next. Nothing worked. Simo was too smart, too careful. He never fell into a routine. He never used the same position twice. He was always thinking 3 steps ahead. He'd set up in a spot, take a few shots, then immediately move to a completely different location. By the time the Soviets figured out where the shots came from, he was already gone. There are stories about Soviet soldiers finding his old positions hours after he'd left. They'd see the packed snow, the small pit he'd dug, the perfect sightlines, and they'd realize how close he'd been, how easily he could have killed them. It was psychological warfare at its finest. Even when he wasn't there, the fear remained. But the Soviets kept trying. They sent more snipers. Simo killed them. They sent reconnaissance teams to track him. He ambushed them. They tried using spies and informants to figure out where he lived and where he might go. The Finns protected him. Every attempt failed. Then on March 6, 1940, something finally went wrong. Simo was in his usual position, hidden in the snow, watching Soviet troop movements. It was just another day, another mission. He'd already killed several soldiers that morning, but the Soviets had gotten smarter. They started using a new tactic. Instead of just sending soldiers forward blindly, they'd send small groups ahead to draw fire. Once the sniper revealed his position by shooting, they'd unleash everything they had on that spot. Artillery, machine guns, everything. And on this particular day, that's exactly what happened. Simo took a shot. Was a good shot, clean kill. But the moment he fired, the Soviets knew where he was. Within seconds, bullets started tearing through the air around him. Machine gun fire, rifle fire, everything they had. Simo pressed himself into the snow, trying to make himself as small as possible. Bullets kicked up snow all around him. He couldn't move, couldn't shoot back. All he could do was wait and hope they didn't hit him. But then something happened that changed everything. An explosive bullet hit him directly in the face. Now, an explosive bullet isn't like a regular bullet. Regular bullets are designed to penetrate. Explosive bullets are designed to blow up on impact. They cause massive damage. And this one hit Simo right in the lower left side of his jaw. The impact was devastating. The bullet tore through his jaw, shattered his teeth, ripped apart his cheek. Half of his face was gone, just gone, blood everywhere, bone fragments, tissue. It was a catastrophic injury. The kind of injury that kills most people instantly. But somehow Simo stayed conscious. He didn't scream, didn't cry out. He just endured. Other Finnish soldiers nearby saw what happened and rushed to help. They dragged him out of the line of fire and got him to a medic. The medics who first saw him thought he was dead, or as good as dead. There was no way someone could survive that kind of injury. Not out here. Not in the middle of a war zone with limited medical supplies. But they tried anyway. They bandaged him up as best they could, loaded him onto a sled, and dragged him through the snow to a field hospital. The whole time, Simo was in and out of consciousness, bleeding heavily, his face destroyed. At the field hospital, the doctors took one look at him and shook their heads. His chances of survival were almost zero. Even if he survived the trip to a real hospital, even if he made it through surgery, the infection alone would probably kill him. Remember, this is 1940. No advanced antibiotics. No modern surgery techniques. Just basic medical care. But they tried anyway. They stabilized him as much as they could, then sent him to a hospital in the rear. During the transport, Simo slipped into a coma. His body was shutting down. The trauma was too much. For 7 days he remained in a coma. The doctors didn't expect him to wake up. His fellow soldiers held a vigil. They prayed, they hoped, but they prepared for the worst. And then on March 13, 1940, something incredible happened. Simo woke up. March 13th. The exact same day the Winter War ended. Finland and the Soviet Union signed a peace treaty, and on that very same day, Simo Häyhä opened his eyes. The doctors couldn't believe it. They called it a miracle. There's no medical explanation for how he survived. The injury should have killed him. The infection should have killed him. The coma should have killed him, but he survived. He was alive, badly injured, yes. His face was permanently disfigured. He'd need multiple surgeries to rebuild his jaw. He'd live with pain for the rest of his life. But he was alive, and the war was over. The Winter War ended in a complicated way. Finland technically lost. They had to give up some territory to the Soviet Union, just like Stalin wanted. But it was a Pyrrhic victory for the Soviets. They'd sent over 160,000 soldiers expecting an easy fight. Instead, they lost tens of thousands of men. Some estimates put Soviet casualties at over 120,000 dead or wounded. Finland, with their tiny army, had held off one of the world's largest military forces for over 3 months. The world was shocked. Nobody expected Finland to last more than a week, but they fought, and they fought hard. And a huge part of that resistance was because of soldiers like Simo Häyhä. His actions inspired the entire Finnish military. He proved that skill, determination, and knowledge of the terrain could overcome superior numbers and equipment. He became a national hero overnight. When people in Finland heard about the White Death, they felt hope. If one man could kill 500 enemy soldiers, maybe Finland really could win. After the war, Simo spent months recovering. The surgeries were brutal. They had to rebuild his jaw using bone from other parts of his body. He had to relearn how to speak. His face would never look the same. The left side of his jaw was permanently deformed, but he survived, and that was enough. Eventually, he returned to his hometown. He went back to farming, back to the quiet life he'd known before the war. He didn't seek fame, he didn't give interviews, he just wanted to be left alone. But the world didn't forget about him. Journalists tracked him down. Historians wanted to know his story. Other soldiers came to meet the legend. For years, Simo refused most requests for interviews. He didn't like talking about the war. He didn't like being called a hero. When people asked him how he felt about killing so many men, he'd give the same answer every time. I did what I had to do. That's it. No elaboration, no justification, just simple acceptance. But as he got older, he started opening up a bit more. He gave a few interviews, shared a few stories. And what struck people most was how normal he seemed. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't bloodthirsty. He was just a regular guy who'd been put in an impossible situation and did what he thought was right. He lived a long life after the war. He never married, never had children. He spent his days farming, hunting, and occasionally talking to historians who wanted to document his story. He lived to be 96 years old. He died in 2002, more than 60 years after the Winter War ended. When he died, all of Finland mourned. They held a state funeral, military honors. The whole country came together to remember the man who'd become a symbol of Finnish resistance. But even in death, Simo remained humble. According to people who knew him, he never wanted to be remembered as a killer. He wanted to be remembered as a Finn who loved his country and did his duty when his country needed him. And that's exactly how Finland remembers him today. So what made Simo Häyhä so deadly? Why was he able to do what no other sniper has ever done before or since? It comes down to a combination of factors. First, his skill. Simo had been shooting since he was a kid. He'd spent thousands of hours practicing. hunting, competing. By the time the war started, shooting wasn't something he had to think about. It was instinct, muscle memory. He could look at a target and know instantly where to aim, how to adjust for wind and distance, when to squeeze the trigger. That kind of skill only comes from years and years of practice. Second, his environment. Simo wasn't fighting in a desert or a jungle. He was fighting in the frozen forests of Finland, his home. Land he knew better than anyone. He knew where to hide, where to shoot from, how to move without being seen. The Soviets were foreigners. They didn't understand the terrain. They didn't know how to fight in that kind of cold. Simo did. He used the environment as a weapon. The snow became his camouflage. The cold became his ally. Third, his temperament. Simo was calm, patient, disciplined. He never rushed, never panicked. Even when bullets were flying around him, he stayed cool. That kind of mental toughness is rare. Most people crack under that kind of pressure. Simo didn't. Fourth, his tactics. Simo understood that staying alive was just as important as getting kills. He never took unnecessary risks. He always had an escape route. He never stayed in one place too long. He was constantly adapting, constantly thinking. That's why the Soviets could never catch him. He was always one step ahead. And finally, his motivation. Simo wasn't fighting for glory or money or fame. He was fighting for his home, for his family, for Finland. That kind of motivation pushes people to do extraordinary things. He knew that every Soviet soldier he killed meant one less threat to his country, so he kept going, day after day, kill after kill, until he physically couldn't anymore. Simo Häyhä's story has had a lasting impact on military tactics around the world. After the Winter War, armies everywhere started paying more attention to sniper training. They realized that one skilled sniper could have a massive impact on the battlefield, not just through kills, but through psychological warfare. The fear that Simo created was just as valuable as the actual kills. Modern military forces now invest heavily in sniper programs. They study Simo's tactics. They teach soldiers about fieldcraft, camouflage, patience. Many of the techniques Simo used, things he figured out on his own, are now standard sniper doctrine. The idea of using natural camouflage, understanding your environment, staying hidden at all costs, these are all things that snipers around the world now train for, and they all trace back in some way to the White Death. There's also a broader lesson here about asymmetric warfare. Finland was massively outgunned. They should have lost quickly, but they used their advantages, terrain, cold weather, knowledge of the land, to level the playing field. Simo Häyhä is the perfect example of this. One man with a simple rifle and superior skill created chaos for an entire army. That's asymmetric warfare, and it's a strategy that smaller forces have used ever since. Look at guerrilla warfare in Vietnam, or Afghanistan, or any conflict where a smaller, less equipped force fights against a larger, more powerful enemy. The tactics are similar. Use the terrain, strike fast, disappear, create fear. Simo didn't invent these ideas, but he perfected them. And his story has inspired military strategists for generations. But beyond the tactical lessons, Simo's story is also a reminder of what humans are capable of when pushed to their limits. He was just a farmer, nobody special. But when his country needed him, he became something more. He became a legend. And he did it not through superhuman abilities, but through skill, determination, and sheer willpower. Over the years, Simo Häyhä's story has become legendary. And like all legends, some parts have been exaggerated. Let's separate fact from fiction. First, the kill count. The official number is 505 confirmed kills with his rifle, plus over 200 with his submachine gun. Some people claim the number is much higher, maybe 700 or even 800. The truth? We'll never know for sure. War is chaotic. Record-keeping isn't perfect. But even if we stick with the confirmed numbers, 505 is still the highest sniper kill count in recorded history. Nobody else comes close. Second, the no-scope thing. Yes, it's true. Simo really didn't use a scope. This isn't a myth. He used iron sights for all of his kills. Why? Like I mentioned earlier, scopes fog up in extreme cold, they reflect sunlight, and they force you to raise your head higher. Simo wanted none of those disadvantages, so he trained with iron sights until he was just as accurate as someone using a scope, maybe even more accurate. Third, the shot in the face story. Also true. This really happened. On March 6, 1940, Simo was hit in the face by an explosive bullet. The injury was real and devastating. Half his jaw was destroyed. He really did fall into a coma for 7 days, and he really did wake up on the exact day the war ended. That's not mythology. That's documented history. However, there are some exaggerations. For example, some versions of the story claim Simo killed dozens of soldiers in a single day. While he did have high kill days, the idea that he regularly killed 20 or 30 people in one day is probably not accurate. His average was about 5 kills per day, which is already insane. Some stories also claim he could shoot targets from over a mile away. Again, probably not true. His effective range was likely around 400 to 500 meters, which is still impressive with iron sights but not superhuman. And some versions of the story make it sound like Simo was invincible, like he never missed, never made mistakes. That's not true either. He was human. He missed shots. He made errors in judgment. He got lucky sometimes. But what made him special wasn't perfection. It was consistency. Day after day, in brutal conditions, he performed at an incredibly high level. That's the real story. Not a superhero, but a highly skilled, highly disciplined soldier who did his job better than almost anyone in history. To really appreciate what Simo Häyhä accomplished, it helps to compare him to other famous snipers. Let's look at a few. During World War II, there were several other legendary snipers. On the Soviet side, there was Lyudmila Pavlichenko, a female sniper who's credited with 309 confirmed kills. She was incredibly skilled and became famous for her achievements. But even her impressive record is only about 60% of Simo's confirmed kills. Then there's Vasily Zaitsev, another Soviet sniper who became famous during the Battle of Stalingrad. He's credited with 225 confirmed kills. Again, very impressive, but less than half of Simo's total. On the German side, there was Matthias Hetzenauer, who had 345 confirmed kills, and Erwin Koenig, though some historians debate whether he actually existed or was propaganda. Either way, none of them reached Simo's numbers. Moving to more modern conflicts, there's Chris Kyle, the American sniper who served in Iraq. His autobiography claims 160 confirmed kills, though the Pentagon officially credits him with 150. Chris Kyle was an exceptional sniper, and his story was turned into the movie American Sniper, but his kill count is less than a third of Simo's. There's also Craig Harrison, a British sniper who holds the record for the longest confirmed kill shot at 2,475 meters. That's over 2 kilometers. An incredible feat of marksmanship, but in terms of total kills, he doesn't come close to Simo. The point is, Simo Häyhä's record stands alone. Nobody in recorded history has more confirmed sniper kills, and remember, he did it in less than 100 days. Chris Kyle served 4 tours in Iraq over several years. Lyudmila Pavlichenko fought for over 2 years. Simo did it all in 3 months. The intensity, the consistency, the sheer volume of kills in such a short time, it's unprecedented. And he did it with a rifle that by today's standards would be considered primitive. No scope, no rangefinder, no spotter. No high-tech equipment, just a man, a rifle, and incredible skill. Conclusion summary. So what's the final takeaway from Simo Häyhä's story? I think there are a few. First, never underestimate the underdog. On paper, Finland had no chance against the Soviet Union. The Soviets had more soldiers, more tanks, more planes, more everything. But Finland had something the Soviets didn't. They had soldiers who knew the land, who were fighting for their homes, who refused to give up. And that made all the difference. Second, skill matters. Simo wasn't successful because he had the best equipment. He was successful because he'd spent his entire life perfecting his craft. He'd taken shooting seriously since he was a kid. By the time the war started, He was one of the best marksmen alive. That's what years of practice and dedication can do. Third, adaptability wins wars. Simo understood that he couldn't fight like a regular soldier. He was one man against an army, so he adapted. He used the terrain, he used the weather, he used psychology, he turned his weaknesses into strengths. That kind of tactical thinking is what separates good soldiers from legendary ones. And finally, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Before the war, Simo was just a farmer, nobody special. But when his country called, he stepped up. He did what needed to be done. He didn't seek glory. He didn't want fame. He just did his duty. And in doing so, he became one of the most effective soldiers in history. Today, Simo Häyhä is remembered as the White Death, the ghost in the snow, the sniper who couldn't be stopped. But in Finland, he's remembered as something more. He's remembered as a patriot, a defender, a symbol of what one person can do when they refuse to give up. His story has been told and retold for over 80 years. Books have been written about him, documentaries made, video games and movies reference him. And through it all, one thing remains clear. Simo Häyhä was the deadliest sniper who ever lived, a farmer who became a legend, a man who faced the largest army in the world and won, and survived. If you want to see more stories like this, subscribe.